How is everybody doing? And welcome back for another Strength Chat episode. Today, I'm joined by a very special guest for you all. She's a pelvic health physio with experience of competing in bodybuilding, weightlifting, CrossFit, powerlifting. Today, I'm joined by the one and only Julia Hlaing. How are you doing?
Thank you. I'm good. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Stephen.
No problem at all. Thanks a lot for taking the time to jump on, Julia. I suppose the first question is, how are you? What's been kind of happening in your world recently?
I'm good. As you mentioned, I have been a pelvic floor physio. It's been 11 years now, and I finally am going through the process myself. So I'm pregnant at the moment. I'm 23 weeks pregnant. So it's been a crazy journey. A lot of things that I knew, but things that experiencing it myself is a whole nother thing itself. So yes, I'm just going through the journey myself currently.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
it'll be
well,
great to start
congratulations.
it. Thank you.
And I'm sure we'll dive into a little bit more about training through pregnancy and those sorts of things because I've seen the content that you've put out there as well, which is really really good. But for everyone listening who might not know, obviously you've said there, 11 years in your current role. For
Yeah.
everyone listening, just want to give a little bit of a background to kind of your own training experience, kind of your like education and those sorts of things. Just want to give a little bit of a background to yourself, Julia.
Yeah, of course. So in regards to training, I mean, since I was a kid, I've always been into some type of sport, whether it was netball, basketball, cross country. And then going into uni, I did find it a little bit harder to stick to the team sport. So I started dabbling more into strength training. So that's when my first, I guess, experience in lifting became, it went into bodybuilding, so bikini modeling. So I did that for about two years. And then after that, I realized I guess the side of, I guess how I look and the aesthetics wasn't as important to me personally. And I wanted to focus into my performance and my strength. So I did notice that I lost a lot of strength when I was cutting all the time. And so I actually went into powerlifting and then I competed in powerlifting for about 2 years. And then I kind of noticed my cardiovascular health, which initially I was into cardio a lot. I would always just run. But one day I was running for the train and I realized I was puffing and I was like, okay, you know what? I want to try something a little bit different. So I started going into a bit of weightlifting and CrossFit. I found my love and passion at the moment in weightlifting, so in Olympic weightlifting, and I've stuck to that for about, I would say, 5 years now. So I've been competing in Olympic weightlifting. I just competed when I was 8 weeks pregnant, actually, at my
Wow.
last comp. Yeah, it was rough. It was rough. But I got through it. And yeah, so in terms of the sporting and competing, that's where I've been. And I do see a mix of a lot of general population clients, but also clients who are athletes and who are at high level competitions, particularly in lifting sports. In what I do now as a pelvic floor physio. So it was great to go through it myself. And in terms of education, I have completed a master's degree in physiotherapy. I initially started as a personal trainer. So whilst I was studying physio, I was a PT teaching classes, a lot of face-to-face clients as well. And that's why my passion for training and the importance of why exercise is so necessary in everyone's lives is such a big deal for me, and a big reason why in like to help people during pregnancy. It's become my passion because I've seen that there's such a limitation in knowledge, in education, in confidence for coaches and for people who are going through pregnancy and postpartum journey. And I feel like I want to encourage people to keep training as much as I can.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Oh,
this is
cool.
where it's all kind of come into play. And I've also, in that past 11 years, I've done a lot of extra studies in pelvic health, particularly.
Yeah. Ah, cool. And from thing, because as you were saying there about, doing bodybuilding and then moving through this might be a little bit of a tangent, but you've mentioned there are kind of all of the things that I would think goes through some people's minds at some point. Whereas, oh, I've lost a little bit of strength. Oh, I want to get stronger. Oh, I want to get a little bit fitter and move from there. Do you
Yeah.
think tied that in with kind of the qualifications that you've got and the experience that you've got with working with people, that you kind of have that been there and done it kind of thing of, right, so I understand what you're saying. Maybe maybe let's try this and work and work through that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, because I've dabbled in so many things, I think it's helped me understand when people have come in and had issues with certain things physically, emotionally as well, which are big components with all these sports. But I feel like yeah, going through injuries myself, going through the process, it's helped me understand parts of why what we need to tackle and the challenges that are faced.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, definitely. Because I think sometimes, and we'll go on to this now as well with training before, during, and after pregnancy as well. Because I think that's a nice segue. Because I know, so basically my last role before I moved to Thailand, I was head of
yeah,
personal training in a gym in Leeds. And part of my role was helping with kind of like coach development. And one thing that you said before about coaches' confidence in terms of supporting women through pregnancy and training. I can imagine male and female trainers sometimes don't have that confidence. And I suppose the first question is, do you think that is a lack of knowledge? I mean, I've had a look at that information. I've trained women. Had qualifications in pre and postnatal. Or do you think the lack of confidence is they're kind of worried just in case something goes wrong, because it's not a small
yeah.
deal? I know, obviously, not to say that somebody having an injured knee or something like that, you're not going to be worried about them re-injuring their knee, but I think it's sometimes or it is definitely a lot more important when someone's pregnant, if that can make sense. What are kind of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, totally makes sense. And I do agree that a large part is the lack of information and education. It's not so much purely just, when you do your coaching degrees and training, there's always a small component, I think, of anything pregnancy related. So that makes it already a little bit hard unless someone goes into further training into it. But then I guess the other thing is the information online is a whole nother thing, which makes it so confusing because there's such a mixed mixed messages online of what you can and can't do during pregnancy. It's not even just with coaches, it's like amongst health professionals and like specialists as well, which I'm definitely finding. And research is so hard to do on pregnant women for ethical reasons and legalities. But I think we've started to notice in the past, I'd say like 2 to 3 years, that things are shifting. And there's a lot of athletes who are pushing boundaries, which is actually showing us that there is actually more to training. You can do more and you're not so fragile in pregnancy. But yes, it's a combination of that, like a mix of messages online.
Yeah, and why
Yeah.
why do you think that is? Because I completely understand the research side of things, but especially when you mentioned there athletes training during pregnancy. You've mentioned there yourself competing at 8 weeks, but
Yeah.
also I can't remember the CrossFit lady's name. Was it Tia?
Yeah.
She
Yeah.
was she like,
Oh,
I've seen content of that still training, and I
yeah.
think especially some of the clients that I've trained who have been pregnant have been like, oh wow, so I can do this, and showing that it can be doing it. And I think the biggest thing is safely. And do you
Yeah.
think that's what kind of causes some of the confusion, that you've got athletes over here doing one thing, and then the kind of information side of things maybe saying another thing, and that's what's kind of maybe setting that doubt in people's minds?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's also because everyone's pregnancies can be so different. It's quite subjective. Like, this one person, an athlete who might have had a great pregnancy in the first might have it difficult the second. That can happen as well. But then also, there are certain risks sometimes which unfortunately you can't always predict. And so if someone does have a high risk pregnancy, then you can't be doing, certain things. But generally, if we're talking about low risk pregnancies, there are so many more things that are accepted, and certain guidelines are coming out to allow for that as well. And yes, we've seen so many athletes, even in the Olympics, we saw so many pregnant athletes competing, which was amazing to see last time. Yeah.
Yeah. And what do you think, we've said there about some of the information and some women have said to me, oh, it's kind of worked both ways. Of some said, oh, I want to start training to feel strong, get my body strong, so it can recover, afterwards. Other people have been like, oh, well, should I really be doing this? Should I be squatting, for example? Should I be doing that? And the common myths that are kind of surrounding training through pregnancy, through the different stages of pregnancy as well.
Mm.
What are the kind of common myths that you kind of work with the people that you work with, and kind of how do you address them and kind of instill confidence in the people that you work with?
Yeah, yeah. So if we're talking about pregnancy, we know for a fact that if you can train and exercise during pregnancy, there's actually much more benefit for yourself and also for the baby. So we definitely know that now. It's actually almost 40% reduction in like high risk pregnancy related issues, so like preeclampsia, high blood pressure, gestational diabetes, and all those things, again, for low risk
Yeah.
pregnancy we talked about. Yeah. But that's a huge benefit in itself, and also a reduction in like postpartum depression as well if someone is continuing to exercise. So I think also understanding that there are massive benefits if you are continuing to exercise during pregnancy versus thinking about what are the dangers
Yeah.
once someone's been cleared. So that's the first thing I would say. And then the second thing would be, yeah, totally correct in terms of keeping strong, because I see people postpartum and the ones that have deconditioned or lost a lot of strength and confidence from stopping exercise, they actually do seem to struggle a bit more once baby arrives with just getting through daily activities because they're so much more fatigued. They might be experiencing more musculoskeletal injuries like their back, RSI injuries, mummy thumb is a thing, because they're not used to holding, even though 3 kilos, average size 3.5, but 3 kilos doesn't seem like a lot. If you were carrying that 3 kilo dumbbell around all day, you would be experiencing discomfort too.
Yeah.
Like even when I lift weights a decent amount, and then when I'm helping some of my clients, sometimes I'm like, oh my gosh, I actually feel my lat cramping, like what is going on? So let alone someone who hasn't trained or stopped entirely, about 9 months, let's say, that's a lot of time of deconditioning. We know within a month of someone stopping, we lose a lot of muscle strength. Yeah, so it is going to be quite beneficial. The concerns would be, yes, if someone has multiple gestation. So if they're having twins or triplets, we do have to clarify with their specialist to see that it's okay. In saying that, I have helped a lot of mums who've been pregnant with twins, including Megan Scanlon. She had twins and she kept training throughout her
Yeah.
pregnancy. As long as we're keeping really regular close assessments with them and also checking with their specialists, it's usually okay. But if there are other comorbidities like heart conditions of the mum, cervix issues, high blood pressure already, just like diabetes concerns, then yes, we have to be a bit more careful because their blood pressure is going to be a bit higher and it increases in pregnancy. But in terms of strengthening and exercise, I would definitely recommend that people continue if they're low risk. In terms of guidelines, we even had some recent changes. 2023, I believe it was, the Australian guidelines actually put moderate to vigorous exercise into the guidelines for during pregnancy.
Okay.
And that was like a big change, right? Yeah, and it was about 2.5 hours per week that you could actually do and implement into. There's also been some recent studies with lifters. So they actually tested people doing like the Valsalva maneuver, lifting up to, I think it was a 10 RM though, of like bench, squat, and deadlifts at 70, 80, and 90%. And it didn't show any risks of the baby's heart rate, or the mother as well.
Yeah.
And that was all really positive. Yeah. And then there was a survey done as well. Again, like I say, it's quite, there's not a lot, but we
Yeah.
do have, I think the survey was about like 679 people, something like that, of people who continue to do like 90 to 100% max lifts during pregnancy. So it was like Olympic weightlifters and CrossFitters and powerlifters. And again, there was no increased risk to their pelvic floor or to their baby.
Yeah.
So all of these things are coming up, and I would usually explain that to my clients who come in and be like, is it okay for me to lift? What I would suggest though is managing your symptoms.
Yeah.
So that first trimester, when you first find out that you're pregnant, everyone's different. Some people, they're perfectly fine. They don't even realize that they're pregnant. And some people experience the worst amount of nausea and fatigue you could ever imagine. And I actually had to experience that, unfortunately,
Oh, wow.
which is, yeah, I was, you always hope that it's not going to be you, but, it does happen. In that situation, you got to reduce and change the expectations. And it has to happen, because there's no way of changing. It's like you're hungover and you can't help it and you can't even sleep it off. you
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
so I would be asking the person, what are your symptoms, how are you feeling at the moment, and then adjusting as you would for any client. If someone's been really sick, if someone's been injured, as a coach, you would be having a chat with them and just seeing where they're at, and then making modifications to match that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I suppose kind of two questions from there. I thought that was good explanation. Generally in terms of a low risk pregnancy, sometimes, and I always think that with most things, the perception of something, you can think of something, it's like, oh no, people might be listening thinking, oh no, well, what if I'm going to be a high risk case or anything? How would that change? In that case, would it be a case of, saying, well, no, we're going to hold off doing this, or, the plan might be changed, or it might be, more checks? Because the other question I was thinking of, how important is the communication, the language that's used? Because you've mentioned a couple of times there, in terms of feeling comfortable, in terms of confidence, and, if you are, like what you mentioned there, having nausea, not feeling very good in the first little bit, there's going to be that thought process of, somebody as the physio, as the coach, being there to help manage expectations, be clear in terms of what the plan is, and have somebody there that the person is can trust. So
Yeah.
yeah, how important is kind of like the language and communication, and then the other question is, what changes for maybe like a high risk case.
Yeah, yeah. The language is so important, because that could determine whether someone just stops entirely and loses all motivation in those rough times, or if they're willing to just, modify and adapt because of the support that they have, maybe like taking a break for a short period of time and then coming back. And so I have seen that happen a lot with some of my clients who struggled in the first, and their coaches were so supportive and just really dialed everything back so that they were able to keep training. It was super simple, from like heavy barbells to just like dumbbell work.
Yeah.
And that made them actually feel like it was achievable,
Yeah.
and it was lighter and it was safer to do. And then once they started to feel better, then it started to bump back up again.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's this misconception that, once you're pregnant, you can't go back up again in terms of load during, and that's not true either. So yeah, that's how I would consider that. And the language is important. So, avoiding things like dangerous,
Yeah.
um, you're unstable, you're weaker, you're fragile, all those things. You don't want to say those words, because it's not true. Things like change, adapting, modifying, that those are the things that we want to be talking about and saying as like the health professionals or the coaches. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just the moment at the moment. It's just the current state at the moment, but we can adapt to it and we can modify it as you start to get better, you know. But the importance is that we keep doing some type of movement to keep them confident.
Yeah.
Yeah. In terms of high risks, you would know, though they would know from their first appointment with their doctors. So they'll have to do blood tests to make sure they'll be seeing their obstetricians and getting their first scans or their midwives. And so by that point already, you'd get a bit of an idea. And if unless someone had a pre-existing um, like issue like diabetes, like type 1, not managed, then that's when we may have to pause for a little bit, again get the clearance from their specialists and then go from there. But
Yeah.
it is important to continue, and again that change could be like a drop in load, the volume, definitely making sure that they aren't overexerting themselves, maybe tracking a little bit more. We don't use the heart rate tracker anymore, but you know, for those people, we might actually have to do that just to make sure that they're not going beyond what is safe for them.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah.
Yeah. I
So
think
it's more conversations, I guess, more check-ins.
yeah, and it
Yeah,
seems to be a common thing that we've spoken about there in terms of making the client feel comfortable and having that trust. And one thing that you said there, using language like dangerous or yeah, you're getting a little bit weaker. That's only going to impact their confidence and maybe make them feel that they're doing something wrong with that language. Would you kind of agree with that?
yeah, yeah, definitely. And
Yeah.
it's very common. You can't really avoid it once you're pregnant too. Like, you know, people can see that I'm a pelvic floor physio and I work with people, and when I'm lifting, I still get comments saying, shouldn't you be doing Pilates now? Or like, why are you raising the butt? Like, you shouldn't be lifting over your head. We shouldn't be squatting. You know, someone said to me, oh, don't reach overhead when you're like reaching stuff from the cupboard. And I'm like, why can't I do that? And so it's just like things that come up, and you're like, oh my gosh, it's still a thing, even
Yeah.
though I'm so aware, but it's a very common thing to hear.
Yeah, yeah, and
Yeah.
that's
And
that's another thing which might be, another maybe another tangent, but I like what you're saying there. Reaching up and grabbing something from the cupboard. If you
yeah,
really wanted that
yeah.
Nutella, you're gonna keep that
Oh
in the cupboard.
gosh.
But
Yeah.
that thing of, I know you've mentioned, research and guidelines have changed over the last couple
Yeah.
of years. Do you think that there is, going back to what we said about, athletes, competing, sharing content? Do you think there is a shift towards, you know, training in the gym, continuing to train because of all the benefits, for during the pregnancy, but also afterwards, that people are coming around to it? Because as well,
Yeah.
there's kind of, in terms of feeling strong, strength training, looking after your body. Well, no, probably more, yeah, probably more so the strength side of things is becoming a lot more popular, and
Yeah.
a lot more like, well, yes, you can, lift heavy. Do you think there is a shift in there, and it's kind of only small pockets now that are saying, well, no, you shouldn't be reaching up and doing that. You shouldn't be doing that.
Yeah.
What kind of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would agree. I would probably say the last 2 to 3 years, I've seen a big shift. And I will think like there's so many people out there who are doing amazing research in these areas. And like I said before, like athletes who are pushing beyond boundaries, and social media. As much as social media can sometimes be harmful with certain messages, it's also really helpful because people who are starting to find this new message is actually they're actually sharing it, and so it's helping others feel more confident and actually question the fact that I don't actually need a bubble wrap myself and I can actually keep doing certain things.
Yeah. And I know we've spoken. It's funny you mentioned there about like the positive side of things, and a key phrase that you said there is athletes, pushing those boundaries a little bit, and showing what can be done. Just to kind of
Mm.
get into the mindset of that, and you'll have experience of this, still, training yourself, especially with the weightlifting side of things. Where does that being able to push that boundary come from? Because, you know, being pregnant, there might be always that thought of, right, we do want to look after we do want to look after yourself.
Yes.
And then
And the
how do
baby,
you
yeah.
balance that up with that side of, well, actually, I'm going to give this a go today and see how I get on because, there is always going to be, a little bit of risk. But
Mm.
if you've got that knowledge, where does that pushing the boundaries, but also looking after yourself? Where's that fine line between pushing that boundary too far? Does that kind of make sense? Well, that's it.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes sense. I think again it comes back down to like education or how much you know
Yeah.
to be safe, which brings on the confidence that it's going to be okay. Also, being a bit more self aware, which is also actually quite tricky, but it's understanding like, okay, I don't feel good today. And sometimes I might have like pushed that. But then today, actually, you know what? It's not going to be a bad thing if I miss the session today. I'm just going to train another day when I rest after I rest a little bit more. Or this doesn't feel good. Like, again, something that I've personally noticed is my SIJ started to play up with split jerks. And I knew it was going to happen at some point. Personally, as an athlete, like I wanted to push it and I did for a little bit, but it didn't help. So then I was like, okay, no, I've got to stop it. So I told my coach, I'm like, I can't do split jerks anymore. We're going to do power jerks instead. And that's been working. So again, it's for me personally, it's been the confidence that I know what can happen. And when it did start to show, instead of trying to fight it, I actually made that modification. And with a lot of my clients, I'll do the same thing. I'll say, okay, let's do this for this period of time. If you notice anything, I need you to let me know. And we're going to make a change. It doesn't mean we've got to stop, but it just means that we've either got to drop the load, we've got to change the exercise, and we've got to manage it in other ways instead of stopping entirely. So this is, I guess, that's where it comes down to understanding, yeah, that
Yeah.
you can make changes.
Yeah, and it goes back to what you were saying before in terms of the language being used. Okay, we're going to change this, we're going to adapt that because, for
Yeah,
people listening or watching, people sharing social media and everything. Obviously, there's levels in terms of athletes and training, and
yeah,
the people
yeah,
that are competing at the top. Yourself competing as well. You have that awareness and that communication or trust with your coach to be like,
yeah,
look, okay, I can't do this. And wherever
yeah,
you are on that scale, if you're a Gen Pop client, just been training for maybe a couple of years or just a regular gym goer, those changes and things that can be adapted are still applicable, but just at the level that you're at. I think sometimes it's a case of, oh, well, somebody's doing a clean and jerk. Oh, yeah, I can do that. Whereas, apply
mm,
it to your own training. Is that what you
yeah,
would kind of agree with?
yeah. Yeah, so it'd be what you're used to doing before pregnancy, and then adapting to that throughout the pregnancy. And for some people who haven't, that I do actually get clients where they haven't actually trained and they're like, I'm actually really lazy, and they'll say that themselves, and I don't really like training, but I've seen the importance and the benefits now of exercise during pregnancy, and I want to do something. And so their type of exercise might look very different. It could be Pilates, it could be going for more walks. It could be just some home-based body weight exercises that you're giving them. It will look so differently, but you've just got to adapt to the person. And that's why understanding what is actually achievable for them and what is actually going to be fun for them, enjoyable. Because when you're tired, when you're sore, when you're like feeling like crap, the last thing you want to do is exercise. So in that time, you want to make it fun and achievable, whatever level they're at.
Yeah.
Yeah,
two
definitely.
Kind of two things from there. So you've mentioned there, and what made me smile from there. Again, a woman that I trained back in the UK. She said the exact same thing. I'm lazy, but I actually want to
Yeah,
train throughout this pregnancy. And actually, she was thinking what I thought was really good. She was actually thinking beyond the pregnancy as well, and basically she wanted
yeah,
to be strong and fit for her child. Basically,
so
which
good.
in
Yeah,
terms of, yeah, again, this might be a little bit of a tangent, but when you're talking about goals and finding
yeah,
your why, I don't think there's
Mm.
any better why than that, being able to be fit enough and strong enough to have time with your family. Do you think that actually, when clients are coming in and they're saying that because they've started training through maybe a challenging time, if you like, because things might have to adapt, because they're going to be changing things, that it actually sets them up for a stronger, healthier life beyond, because
Yeah,
they have that why. And then
totally.
sorry, yeah, answer that one, because then there was another question that I was thinking about. Sorry, do you kind of
Yeah.
agree with that, or is that what you've seen?
Yeah, agree. And so the goals, like I'm sure a lot of as a coach too, like you would do goal settings, right? Because
Yeah.
you want to understand what the client wants. And so yeah, like it could be instead of being weight loss, the goal might be I want to be able to lift the pram, I want to be able to lift my child and breastfeed. And so you want to start thinking as a coach, like, okay, what are these movements that are required for this? What's the type of weight that they might at least need to start off with? So, like I said, like that 3 kilo weight, can they just work with dumbbells at 3 kilos for a while, build that confidence? Can you get them to do movements like getting off a chair, bending over to change a diaper, getting down onto the ground and getting up? Like you can move. I'm sure like many coaches can adapt to those types of yeah, like movements and activities. Some people it might be like labor. Is it like, okay, being able to the endurance side of that's going to take hours, sometimes days, sometimes being able to get down and up. How well can your hips move? And it can be just things like that. It doesn't have to be weight loss, doesn't have to be how heavy you're going to be lifting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you've kind of touched on it there anyway, because as you were talking, but in terms of the role of the coach, of the personal trainer, sometimes, and we've spoken about this before, about the knowledge and the confidence of the coach, or the personal trainer. how how important is the role of the coach and personal trainer? And two, what would be kind of your suggestions or recommendations to the coaches listening, in terms of, like what the exercises you've mentioned there, making it fun, making it so that they can change and adapt? Because you can get that information, but it's like with anything. I always use the analogy of getting your PT qualification is like learning how to drive, and then when you're actually on the roads driving, you actually suss out, right, okay, this is what's actually, and you've got to kind
Yeah.
of, especially as a PT, I know I've done it myself, and this is part of the reason why I've kept with a podcast, because selfishly I get to learn from physios like yourself, but also it's that continuous development. So yeah, how important is the role of the coach, and what's kind of your recommendations to point them in the right direction, so that they can provide a good quality and standard of service to the clients that they work with?
Mm. It is a lot to do with having that open communication with them. So if they're confident in you or you have a good rapport with them, they will tell you what they're experiencing and what they're feeling and being able to adapt to that. So it could be something like in the first trimester, their boobs are going to be so tender and sore. So, if they haven't had the confidence to tell you, it's going to be a bit tricky. But if someone can understand, a coach can be openly like, okay, are there any discomfort? Like, are you experiencing any discomfort at the moment? What have you noticed? What changes have you noticed? And then being like, okay, well, obviously you're not going to give them a prone row or
Yeah.
anything lying on their tummy if they're mentioning that to you. So I definitely have seen a mix of coaches sometimes when they haven't quite been able to ask what they're experiencing and they're just still giving them like certain exercises that might not be comfortable. And then they're saying to me, oh, I don't feel comfortable doing this, but they haven't been able to tell their coach. So having that open communication, that's definitely the first one. And then adapting to it once they tell you what the change is, or what the issue is. The other thing would be like again asking them how their appointments are going. So I sometimes I don't think, people just think, oh, they're going to the physio, they're going to their midwives or OBs, they're all good, don't ask anything. I think it's very important to be invested in how their appointments are going and knowing when they're going. Say, is there any changes that we need to make? Maybe contacting them if need be,
Yeah.
if they can't explain that to you. That already shows that you care, and then it'll give you more information as well if they can't express that to you. Yeah, so it is going a little bit out, of some people's comfort zones, but that is how you're going to keep your client. Because yes, if and I think also the first time it's always going to be the hardest. The
Yeah.
first, every time a coach has like their first pregnant client, it's like, oh my gosh, what do I do? So yeah, looking things up a little bit more. Like there's so much online these days. There's so many great coaches that are well in pregnancy and postpartum. So maybe starting to follow some of their pages, to get some ideas of what they're doing too. And being open with the client. There's definitely been clients where they're like, "Oh, I know I'm the first pregnant person, like for my coach, but I trust him." And so they were happy to keep going. I'm like, that's awesome. I'm happy to chat to your coach as well and help guide them. Then from that point, that coach gets that experience with that first client, and then they end up building more confidence with the next.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one way. I have also had coaches where they were like, you know what, I don't actually feel confident in working with this pregnant client, and I think it's actually better that I give them to someone else. That's also happened before, because they weren't so much, I guess that wasn't their passion, or they didn't really
Yeah.
want to do that. So that's also fine too, because you're looking at your client's best interest in that situation, right? So it's like, are you willing to put in the extra mile, especially if this is your first client? Look into like social media, look into this, understand what they're going through, ask them more about how they're recovering, what they're feeling, and then making those changes. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was a really good explanation there, and I really liked what you said there about referring the client to another coach, because what
Yeah.
was going through my head, especially from my experience of helping coach development, I think sometimes there is a mindset of I need to train everybody. I need to be able to help
Yeah.
everybody. Whereas, ultimately, you don't want to do a disservice to the client. And it's a little bit
Mm.
like, if you're if someone's come to you to ask for weightlifting and you have no idea how to weightlift. Actually, no, I
Yeah.
think this person would be right, because again, a little bit of a tangent, but that can work the other way, where someone might refer you to train
Yeah.
somebody for bodybuilding or whatever else from there. And yeah, I really liked what you thought, what you said about the communication side of things and speaking to the physios and the midwives, because as we've been speaking through this chat, what's been going through my head is that all the skills that you've said there from a coach's side of thing is what you would do when you're working with somebody who is I'm not saying pregnancy is an injury. I know I said this before, but if people
Yeah.
have an injury, you would speak to their physio, you would speak to
Yeah.
their surgeon or anything like that. The
Yeah.
the skills are still applicable that you would use as
Same.
as a coach. And I think the underlying thing is that you just want to like build trust. But what I like that you mentioned there is just show that you care, because
Yeah.
you can and I've had it before where coming in the clients come into the session, how are you feeling, have you had any changes or anything like that. And sometimes it might not be a case of always speaking to the midwife or physio, but if you're not 100% sure,
Mhm.
especially from my experience, when I've spoken to physios and midwives, they're actually really helpful. And when you're showing
Yeah.
about kind of like the trust, they kind of
Yeah.
the language that they use to you as a coach makes you feel more comfortable that the job that you're doing
Yes.
in the gym is better, rather than them throwing loads of like technical or dangerous language at you. You're like, oh my God, actually they're quite supportive, because again, from my experience, I feel as though, they care about the client and want to make sure that they're looked after. Is that kind of your experience as well, from maybe PTs that you've worked with, or midwives that you've worked with?
Yeah. In the end, everyone, has is working together, and that's how it should be. I just believe that, yeah, everyone has their own specialty. And it's great when everyone who has their different specialties come together to help one person out. And that's what we want. But yeah, I know sometimes it's not as easily said than done,
Yeah.
but that's when we have the best type of like patient care, we call it, or client care, is
Yeah.
when we can do that. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And as well, I suppose, when you've got that team, when you've got that team around you, um, I know from the physios that I've worked with, you end up, whether you're a client or a coach, you actually end up learning something yourself. I
Yeah.
know obviously, we've spoken about looking online, courses, all those sorts of things, but I know how I've learned is, actually being there with the physios and asking questions because what I think is really good, and for the coaches listening to have that instill that confidence in you is you can then apply it to a real world situation rather than having all of this information and then
Mhm.
thinking, oh God, how do I apply that to anything? Because, a lot of people say, oh, I need to get more experience. I need to get more experience. And it goes back
Mhm.
to, what you said, working with your first pregnant client. The more that
Yeah.
you're asking questions and speaking, it then has a knock-on effect that you build momentum and
Yeah.
confidence and knowledge to work with more. Um,
Yeah.
Quite a lot of content and information in there, Julia, but I thought that was a really, really good chat. And there's been plenty of gold nuggets of information that you've mentioned there. But the last question that I like to ask for everybody listening, whether it be clients listening, coaches listening, what would be your take-home points or words of wisdom for everybody listening?
Mm. Okay. Let me just think. Words of wisdom in regards to pregnancy. Um, yeah, well, it will definitely be I guess my belief and motto is that yes, in pregnancy, it's not a time of fragility. It's actually a time of building new strengths physically and also emotionally and psychologically. And so this is actually a great time to learn more about yourself and how you can adapt to change. It's not easy though, but it's definitely doable with the right support.
Yeah. Nice. I really like that. I think that's good. I think that's a good in terms of like mindset to go off from there because anytime I know we've spoken about being able to adapt and change, but sometimes change is uncomfortable because people like their routine and like what they know. It's like that. Is it off a Batman film or something? People are scared of what they don't understand or something. And I think, the more, especially through the conversation that we've had today, the more that conversations are out like this, and it's just going to give people that more confidence, and as well provide more resources that people can go and look at and find out. Okay, cool. So this is the change that I need to make. So on that topic, Julia, if anyone has any questions about what we've spoken about today, want to reach out to you or speak to you or see the content that you put out there, where could people find you or reach out to you, Julia?
Yeah. You can always reach out to Pelvic Strong, which is my personal handle, but you can also reach out to PB Physio or PB Physio Olympic Park.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot for taking the time to jump on, Julia. Really, really enjoyed chatting with you today. Thanks a lot to everyone listening, and I will see you all at the next episode.